Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to Top Secret News Radio Show. I'm your host, Christina George. And for the next hour, man, I say this every week that I've got a great guest, but it just keeps getting better. I've been very blessed to have known a lot of people over the years in these fields, and I can reach out to them. And tonight is no different. As many people know, my first show that I started in radio was Paranormal Connections. And the reason I started that show was pretty much to show the connections between the fields. And didn't go over so well. So I ended up having to use Paranormal Connection just for paranormal type topics. And then I created first Aliens, UFOs, and Beyond, which was the first show that I had. And then later it turned into Top Secret News. Um, but I have always preached on my shows about how I feel that, it's all interconnected. Uh, and a lot of this came from my personal experiences, but then also over the years interviewing, so many private clients that I had that I did paranormal stuff with, a lot of abductees and contactees, a lot of things. Interviewing over the time, I just started seeing a lot of the connections. And so it, again, made me want to really get out there and push that because it made a lot of more sense at that point. Um, the fields just were so very separate. So tonight's guest, it was great. I ran across his book, and boy, oh boy, I was like, this is perfect time to have him come back on the show. I had him on years ago to talk about his book. So tonight we are going to be talking to Preston Dennett. And Preston has actually began investigating UFOs and the paranormal way back like in 1986. That's when he discovered that his family, friends, coworkers, everybody was having like a lot of dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he's interviewed hundreds of witnesses. He's been a field investigator for MUFON. He's a ghost hunter, paranormal researcher, and an author of 30 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. So tonight, Preston's going to be joining me to discuss his books, Humanoids and High Strangeness, which represents 20 all-new, original, and unpublished accounts of people who've had face-to-face contact with a variety of humanoids. The diversity of entities is mind-boggling. There's grays, human-looking ETs, mantids, reptilians, strange humanoids, angels, nature spirits, ghosts, poltergeists, demons, Bigfoot, and supernatural entities of all kinds. We're going to be talking about this for everybody who is in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to share this on your pages. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat room. We'll just go ahead and start. Hello, my friend. How are you? Jackie, Preston is so accurate and cool. Yes, he is a great guy. We're going to go ahead and bring him on. Hey, Preston, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's been a long time, but boy, oh boy, I can't. This is a perfect topic.
I hope so. It's certainly interesting. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, of course. So, I mean, obviously, you have done all kinds of interviews, written all kinds of articles, all kinds of book on everything that you could possibly think of, ET affiliated as well as paranormal, Bigfoot, really across the board. What really made you decide to write this book?
Well, there's, I think the real reason is because there is a very strong paranormal connection to a lot of ET contact. It's integrally connected in some way. And that's not given a lot of attention. It's overlooked. It's even censored out of some people's reports, which I know for a fact because I've talked to them. And, their cases have been published in other books and not accurately because the high strangeness part is taken out. And this is something that's, I certainly learned this early on, which is why I started investigating, first ghosts, and then Bigfoot and out-of-body experiences and mediumship and near-death experiences. And the whole thing, healing and past lives and
Yes.
precognition, because this kept coming up. And I'm like,
Yes.
what is going on here? And it's just been a long, long journey in trying to figure this out. And finally, I'm like, you know what? Let's just lay it all out in one book and make sure that everyone's experiences in their totality is represented. So this book covers 20 cases. Each person, this is the requirement to be in this particular book, is that you had to have seen a humanoid of some kind, and extraterrestrial for the most part. There is one guy who saw an elf. I think it's an elf.
Okay.
But nature spirits and angels, I mean, like you said in the introduction, ghosts, demonic spirits, ETs of all kinds, and coming from all over the world, by the way, which I thought was a really fun thing to do, because often people, you read a lot about the US, but this
Right.
is a worldwide phenomenon. We know that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I've got cases in Canada, one from Peru, one from Argentina, one from England, France, Germany, and all over the world. So that brings a little bit of a cross-cultural perspective.
Right. Right. It's not just something just here. I mean, I've always found it's very fascinating. And again, having my own experiences in both sides, I also found that a lot of times when people were reporting paranormal experiences or things that they had gone through, um, I could interview them and they may start saying about, how they've been contacted or possibly abducted. And just like you said on the opposite side, on the UFO side, where they'll take away paranormal stuff, in the paranormal, they would delete all that stuff. They're like, oh, we don't want to talk about, if you now say you've, been abducted, you're going to be crazy. So they're never going to believe the paranormal stuff. It blows my mind how each field can think that by including evidence from the other fields that's going to all of a sudden flip the switch and make everybody not believe it, that, the people are crazy.
Yeah, which is so unfortunate, because here are the people who are going through this. And
Yes.
it's like, well, which side am I on here?
And I had people tell me I needed to pick a side. And I'm like, well, that would be great. I thought growing up, I thought everything that I was experiencing, including my precog dreams, everything was all paranormal related, because I knew no better. It wasn't into, lots again, experience and having things happen to me, having to do past life regression, having to do hypnotherapy, all different things to try to figure out what was going on. Then it all kind of connected. So, I think that is very unfortunate that a lot of this information is left out, because I know just myself of interviewing people for the show on both shows. There's a lot of similarities
Exactly.
in a lot of the stories that I get.
I mean,
Do you find that too?
I kind of understand why some researchers wanted to do that initially, because they're very nuts and bolts, and people are just trying to prove that UFOs are real. And in you bring levitation and telepathy and ghosts
Right,
and mediumship and all of this stuff. It's a big pill for
right.
skeptics to swallow. But you know what? It's the truth. So what are you going to do? Not tell the truth? How is that credible? How
Yeah,
is that accurate? It's not. So I think as researchers, you really have to put the evidence first. The actual
yeah.
information and data comes first. Then you can put whatever theory you want about this, but at
Right.
least look at the evidence.
I agree. Hey, Robert, and Robert just had some major surgery, so thank you for being in the hospital and tuning in tonight. But he says, what about dragons?
Ah. It's funny. I had a dream about, or like an out of body experience,
Oh,
actually,
okay,
with a dragon. um, I,
okay,
I haven't heard a whole lot of like firsthand stories about it, though I personally did have an OBE. I've had a lot of astral projection, which came right. This is weird. And this is one of the reasons I know it's connected, because I've certainly read about this and interviewed a lot of people who we'll have an on-board experience and then learning astral projection. Well, as soon as I started investigating UFOs, I was having out-of-body experiences like nobody's business, which I pursued. I mean, I aggressively pursued it because my mom had passed away, and I wanted to know if there was life after death. But yeah, I did have this OBE where I popped out of my body, as you do, and was just wandering around the house and went into the backyard and looked up. And it's very much you're in the normal world to a certain extent. I mean, you can see your house and your yard and so forth.
Right.
This is in Reseda, outside of LA. And I looked up and I saw this cloudy-like object coming towards me. I'm thinking, holy cow, this is a UFO. And it was all lit up. And it's this fiery glowing cloud and it's coming closer. And then out comes this dragon, an emerald green dragon. And, even though you're out of body and you're like, it can't really be harmed, you're not physical. When this dragon lands next to you, and it's, they're big.
Right. Very weird. Yes.
It scared the living daylights out of me. And
I bet.
Nice dragon, nice dragon. Because, its head is as big as your body. And it went right down and put its head up against me. And I put my hand on it. And it was just a real special, profound experience, which, I think from an outside perspective, people are like, yeah, you dreamed about dragons. It was more than that. It really was, for me, certainly.
And for anybody who's ever had an out-of-body experience opposed to a dream, you can tell the difference. It is a whole different experience.
100%. You're awake.
So,
you're actually more awake than you are now, in a weird way.
Well, and you're very present when everything is happening. I feel like when you're in the dream state, you just kind of just watching the movie of whatever, is going on. But when you have the out of body experience, you're very present in the moment and everything is like it's in that reality. Like you're experiencing whatever it is. It's a very different experience. And I can see if somebody hasn't had an out of body experience, they probably would try to link it as, oh yes, it could just be a dream. But if you ever have one, oh yeah, you'll know the difference. You definitely know the difference.
The first instant, you're like, oh my gosh, there is life after death. It's that profound. In 1 second, you're like, wow. Because you can see your body on your bed, and it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't really link dragons to this in any real connected way, other than my own. I did have one weird experience.
Well, it's interesting. Robert loves the dragons, and so there you go, Robert. You take it that with however you want. Rosso Deborah says, my daughter videotaped something that looked like a possible UFO coming out of a storm that shot from the sky, diving left to the ground one night.
Yeah, UFOs love storms, actually. And from what I understand, they can actually harness the energy from, like volcanoes and lightning and things like this. So that doesn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, well, we know, spirits and things like that. I mean, they're very attracted to electronics, which is why our batteries die all the time. Us as people, some of us who are empaths, we feed off of the energy of other people. I mean, it would make sense. And you do see a lot of sightings during storms, especially like high ones with a lot of lightning. And again, people will say, oh, it's just the lightning. It's nothing but, I've seen, some video and some photos that it's very apparent that, behind where the glowing is coming, there's definitely some type of craft.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a friend.
Yeah. She's jealous. She wants her attention.
All of my guests that have animals, they always seem to want to end up at some point to come on camera. So we're definitely very friend family and friendly. So hold on just a second. Okay, I have a question. This is coming from Jonathan in Twitter. He is asking, have you ever had any personal experiences with an extraterrestrial or a spirit yourself?
I have all of that. Yeah. My first spirit encounter was when my mom passed away. I saw her appear as a full color apparition during the service. So that was really dramatic, and didn't think really that it was a spirit until years later when I found out ghosts were real. Because I came into this as a skeptic and started investigating UFOs. And it was only about 4 years in where I had my first really dramatic encounter with an orb that came down over my car. It was just a tiny little thing, like a golf ball, but I had missing time. Yeah, so a full on missing time encounter. And that was followed, and that was 1991, July. That year, I must have had 4 or 5 really good sightings. I mean, I had a UFO talk to me. I am not kidding. It was the strangest thing.
What did it tell you?
It said, well, it wanted me to know something about this person I was interviewing. This lady, I'll call her Wendy, was having major encounters, and she had described how she had jumped out of bed and kicked a gray in the neck. And she said, I think I actually killed this thing. I mean, you're kidding. And I knew she was telling the truth. She had corroborating witnesses. She had medical evidence. She was very sincere. I mean, her case was absolutely legitimate. But that's a lot to wrap your head around when someone says that. Yeah. And I was transcribing the interview that I had done with her, because I do record all my interviews. I want it to be accurate. And I got to that part. I'm leaning back in my chair thinking, I don't know about this, because I hadn't heard of that. Now I have many times. This does happen. But I remember leaning back in my chair, and suddenly I got this super strong, absolutely irresistible impulse to run onto the roof. I lived in a condominium complex on the 3rd story in Canoga Park, Southern California. And so I grabbed my glasses, which I used for driving. Don't need them legally. I've got pretty good vision, but for some reason I grabbed my glasses and ran onto the roof of the condominium complex. I thought to myself, what am I doing? You're not allowed up here. It's against the rules. What are you doing? And I was literally up there 10, 20, 30 seconds tops, probably 10 seconds, when a UFO appeared. And when it's right across the way and almost at eye level, because I'm at the 3rd story, and this thing was just above the roof of a 2-story apartment building right across the parking lot in the little LA River there. So 100, 200 feet away. And it was this bright, fiery orange oval. And as soon as it appears, it blasts me with a message. And it wasn't English, it wasn't talking out loud and telepathy, but it was telepathy, but it wasn't words.
Right.
It was knowing. And it said very clearly, I got the message. It said, hello, we're Wendy's ETs. It's us. You don't believe? Well, we're for real. She's telling the truth. If you don't believe, watch this. So that was, in essence, the message. If you were to translate it into words, it was, we're real. This is us. Watch this. She's telling the truth. And this darn thing, which had been still and kind of just rocking there, darted to the left and to the right and to the left and to the right and back and forth about 10 or 20 times, getting lower and lower so I could see exactly how big this thing was, which was, well, not quite 20 feet, but over 10.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, pretty big.
Good size.
Yeah. And just disappeared. It was there maybe 10 or 20 seconds. But man, oh man, it talked to me. Not the only time that's happened. So, yeah, I've had some real amazing encounters. One other real quick. I was returning from a friend's house. I never get to tell this one, and it's just so cool. Because they give you personal messages that are just for you. And I was driving from San Diego to LA. I'd visited a friend down in San Diego. It was late at night. The freeway is crowded. This is the 405 freeway, which you can look this up. It's one of the worst freeways in the world. Don't do it. You will never. It's so crowded.
It doesn't even matter what time. It's always crowded.
Yeah. So, so it's pretty late at night. and I'm on the 405 freeway approaching LA, and I see this light ahead of me on the road, and it's this huge globe of orange light right over the freeway. I'm thinking, well, I don't remember that because I've done this route 100 times at least. I'm like, well, that's not a street light. It's enormous. I mean, this is like big as the full moon, if you know what I mean, the apparent size.
Right.
But it's low. There was a cloud cover of maybe 1,000 feet, and it was below that. So we're talking, I don't know, 500 feet up. And I'm getting closer. Of course, you're booking it on the freeway. You're going 60, 70 miles an hour.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, there's nothing attached to it that I can see, because you're looking for, your mind doesn't instantly jump to UFO. You try to interpret it as like, well, is that a streetlight? No, it can't be a building. No, it's not a helicopter. It's enormous. And finally, I'm like right almost under it. And I'm looking up at it. I'm like, holy cow, that is not normal. That is, that's got to be a UFO. It's got to be. And I, of course, look down on either side of me, and there's cars, and we're all racing along. And I'm like, well, I can't stop because I'm not in the right lane, right? I'm in I don't know. It wasn't the full far left lane. It was the next one over. It's a 4-lane freeway. And
did you notice if anybody else seemed to see it, or were people pulling over or anything, or was it just you?
It was just me.
Interesting.
Which, I've certainly interviewed people who said, no one else seemed to see it. And I'm like, well, they can do that. They can pick and choose who sees them.
So it's like cloaked to everybody else except for the intended person that they want to see it. Okay.
But it's hard to, like, really, how do they do that? I don't know. I've had contactees ask, and they said, oh, yeah, it's easy for us to do. They didn't explain the mechanics, but they can do that. And yeah, I'm thinking, well, does not anyone see this? You couldn't miss it. It covered the entire width of the freeway, both sides, but it was directly over the lane, the northbound lane.
Wow.
So as I'm going right under it, it blasts a message at me, and it says, your niece has just been born. And I'll never forget, it was July 9th, and I won't give her age away because it was in the 90s. I'll say that. Yeah, it gave me that message, and I'm like, wow, because I did not know my sister-in-law's due date. I have 3 older brothers, an older sister, a younger sister. There's a lot of us, and hard to keep track of everything that's going on. I knew she was pregnant, of course.
Did you immediately call her to find out?
Well, as soon as I got home, there was a message like, your niece has been born. I'm like, I know, I know.
That is amazing. I love that.
Cool? Which is just the neatest thing, because I've heard this from other people where ETs will take them on board and say, you're going to marry this person, or you will be moving to this house. You're going to break up, or you're going to get a raise at work. They give you information. And it happened to me.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there's more high strangeness for you that, people might call that paranormal, but this is why it's so important to look into all of this, because it's part of the experience.
Absolutely. Hey, Leah, so good to see you. She says, good day, Christina and Preston. Love you all the way from Australia. And Leah, I need to get you back on the show too. You have such a continuously great story experiences as well. Sorry, I've got the hiccups so bad right now.
Of course.
All right. So Lawrence is asking from Instagram. He's asking, what do you think demons are?
They're real, 100%. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I get a lot of people, well, not a lot, but there's a segment of the population that thinks extraterrestrials are demonic. And I can say with some confidence that I don't think so. Because I looked into the angelic phenomena, spiritual phenomena, ghosts, demons, poltergeists, animal ghosts, tree spirits, nature spirits. As near as I can tell, demonic spirits some are sometimes conflated with poltergeists, which I don't
Okay.
think is accurate. Because I think a demonic spirit is a non-human spirit. It's a spirit that hasn't been human and is very negative, and whose goal is basically to wreak havoc. And I've investigated some hauntings that were clearly demonic spirits because they have a certain pattern. It usually starts out with knocking noises on the wall, cold spots, foul odors, and it's just super active haunting. And they eventually manifest as these very, very tall black apparition. And at some point, they'll try to possess usually the most vulnerable person in the house. It could be a child, it's someone messing around with the Ouija board, someone who has an illness or is just emotionally disturbed, or they usually target one person.
Right.
And,
Right.
yeah, there
Even,
was
or a lot of times, even like if you're sick or different things, anything where you're not 100%, yeah, is a
a
definite
drug addiction or something
right.
like that.
Alcoholism, anything. If you're altered in any way, yeah, it can definitely affect
And
you
then
pretty.
it
Right.
comes, no, it'll attack. It
Yeah.
will try to move in. It will throw you against the wall, and usually it'll attack you in bed. And it comes and it lays over on top of you and tries to move inside of you and possess you. And I've had 3 cases where it moved to that stage. But it follows a very set pattern. And so does a UFO encounter, which is very different. So they're not the same thing by any
Okay.
means. And they are real. As I think angels are probably real too, because I've talked to enough people who've described them. So yeah,
Well,
it's
what about Bigfoot? Because that's one thing that has always been a huge topic. If we've got sightings, we've got video, we've got all these different things, especially nowadays, of what people are saying are Bigfoot. We have, castings of their footprints, all kinds of different things, but we never find bones, we never find a body, we never find anything, no matter how much they hunt for them, nothing is ever found. Why do you think that is? What do you think that's classified?
I think there's a couple of reasons for that, because if you actually track the literature, there are a number of cases of Bigfoot captures and Bigfoot, killings, where the bodies are scooped up and basically covered up. And you can track some to the Smithsonian. There's a cover up. There's no doubt about it. I'm not exactly sure why. But on the other hand, a lot of these Bigfoot I think they're sentient. I really do.
Okay.
And I think they're also very psychically advanced, because I have cases of this. And I've got a bunch of Bigfoot books, but they can turn invisible, and they can do, there's
Oh,
telepathy. There's a whole paranormal aspect to Bigfoot, which is like the UFO field, controversial and overlooked and covered up. And I kept away from Bigfoot because I thought, this is probably real. This is going to distract from my UFO research. I'm already dealing with ghosts and
yeah,
mediumship and all of this. I don't know if I can handle another thing on my plate.
yeah.
And of course, that's when I had to, because this guy from Canyon Country says a UFO landed in my backyard. And the next day, Bigfoot was there. And I was in telepathic contact with it. And then we had a poltergeist outbreak in our home in the weeks that followed. And this
Wow.
is that weird connection that sometimes occurs.
So
I
they
ended up,
just had a whole collaboration of phenomena going on all at one time.
yeah,
Interesting. Interesting.
which in this latest book, Humanoids and I Strangeness, there's 2 cases like that where Bigfoot showed up, and it didn't surprise me because by this point I'm expecting it.
Right, right.
But
And I
yeah,
think that the first time that you hear these, a story for the first time, they do sound like so out there. Because it's the first time you've heard it, and it just seems beyond the scope of reality. And when I tell stories, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I started to believe it for a little while, but then all of a sudden it kind of sounded like something out of a movie." Well, yeah, if you've never experienced it before, that's probably exactly, and you probably would think somebody's a little, out there, with the stuff that they're experiencing and telling you about. But then when you keep interviewing people and you keep talking to people, and then you start to hear similar stories coming out, you're like, oh, wow, well, maybe there is something to this.
Yeah, it absolutely challenges your reality, which is how
Yeah,
skeptics survive because this believing in UFOs is not, and I hate that word believing because either you know or you don't.
right, right.
But it challenges. It's a core belief, So this is something that's going to affect you profoundly in how you feel about yourself, your place in the world, and all of this. It's like religion or politics or anything it's a core belief. And some people are just not willing to have to completely destroy their belief system, their worldview, by accepting this subject. And I mean, that's what happened to me when I found out UFOs were real. I was so upset. I'm like, what? There's a cover up? We're being visited. People are being taken on board craft. Are you kidding me? Why isn't this being taught in schools? Why is this not being talked about? Why are people being ridiculed?
Right,
So
right.
at some point,
But
for those who don't believe, I just have to say, with all due respect, do your research, do your homework. Bigfoot is real. Evidence is undeniable. UFOs are real. You cannot explain the evidence any other way. It's absolutely real.
I think for, so many people, I mean, they were taught none of this existed and that people who talked about this were crazy to a point that nobody wanted to talk about it. But I also believe that in all fields, I think that there are tons of skeptics, again, because it's contrary to what they've been taught and what they believe. And so the only way, I don't think all the research in the world, like you can read it and you can be, oh, okay, that could be feasible. That could be the answer. But it's until you have your own personal experience that changes you, and it changes you forever. I say this all the time. It's like it opened Pandora's box for me of needing to answer questions in my own life. And it seemed like for every answer that I got, it opened up like 10 more questions of, and then it's trying to connect all the dots. It's exhausting. And especially when you start realizing that everything is connected to the other fields, because although just researching one field is a ton of information, and in each field is exactly the same, there's so much information and so many unanswered questions, but you really do have to kind of encompass it all in order to really see the big picture. So it's mentally exhausting to try to absorb all of the information, all of the views, all the opinions, all the evidence, the research. So I feel like, yeah, it's just when a person has their own experience. And I think now, too, with the whole congressional hearings and more people, you know, it's not like there haven't been people like us coming out and talking about all this stuff forever. But because they're so high in the government, of course, now that changes everything, because why would they lie? We might lie, they think, but why would they lie?
Our
So
government, why?
go figure, right? You gotta love our government because it's just like Roswell, or Area 51. It's like deny, deny, deny till you cannot deny any longer, and then switch it up, give it another answer for it, and it's like before it was like, oh, we couldn't give out information like that even if we wanted to because the society couldn't handle it, and then it's like, okay, it comes out and everybody's like, yeah, well, we figured this was real long time ago. Like, they didn't get any of the reaction. Do you think that people now, with so many sightings and the congressional hearings and more people coming out, do you think that it's a more accepted thing? There more people are switching to that side of being a believer?
Oh yeah, yeah. And until, like you said, there's a difference between belief and knowledge. Experiencing it
Right,
yourself, there's no doubt,
right,
and you can't unknow it. You have no choice. But it's absolutely more acceptable. Um, and I think that's why we're seeing disclosure, honestly, because they can't deny it. Just to say this is not real would make them look stupid. They look like idiots, and they do, because they're saying, "Oh, well, we've got these sightings, and we don't know what they are." Oh, sure you don't. That's disingenuous. I don't believe that for 1 second. Our governments know exactly what's going on. How long ago was Roswell? 80 years? Come
right,
on. You cannot
right,
say that this was not, that you don't know what this is. You
right,
know. They
right.
have that craft. They have the bodies. And they're talking
And
about
have,
sightings.
right.
Yeah.
And everybody that mentioned anything about those, or were whistleblowers back then, were just blacklisted out of the fields, out of everything, or threatened so much that they were fear of their lives and would go into hiding. I mean, it's crazy, but again, we're talking about all the same things. Now, talking about disclosure, here's something I have to ask you. So obviously, there's been it just seemed very timed that all of a sudden we started having all of these sightings. Everything was caught on it. It was actually making it to mainstream news, which is always a red flag right there. um,
Yep.
oh, we're going to shoot down something down. Oh, they're unidentified all of a sudden. Do you think a lot of that is our own craft, or do you really think that the ETs are just now deciding to make themselves known on a huge basis, or a combination?
Well, if you're talking about, what was it, this year? Yeah, in January,
Yes.
like the Chinese balloons and all of
We had
this.
like three in like a week or
Yeah,
something like that, like Alaska, Canada, and
yeah.
over
I
in
I think
Michigan.
that's pure propaganda. I don't think that that's ET for 1 second. It's
Okay.
not. It doesn't sound like ETs. It's not. The observations people are giving are not craft that are silver metallic, stopping on a dime, shooting across the sky, going straight up, doing all the
Right.
things that we see with genuine UFOs. These are objects that are meandering across the sky, and they're calling them UAPs, unidentified, and shooting them down. You can't shoot down a UFO because they know when you're going to send a missile after them long before you even launch it. And they
Oh,
can
right.
fly circles around it. We don't have the technology to take them down. Uh,
Right.
so I don't think for 1 second those were genuine uh, UFOs, meaning extraterrestrial craft.
Right.
But I do think extraterrestrials, and that's what I think we're dealing with here, because everyone has their theory. But I'm telling you, I think they're ETs, have been putting on displays and showing themselves for a very long time. And we see waves of sightings like Gulf Breeze or Withville, Virginia, or Belgium, or France had a wave in 1954 that left that country in no doubt. Anyone who was there knew that they were real, because there was, let's see, September and October of 1954, several thousand cases in those 2 months of them landing and humanoids coming out. It was
Mm,
an
mhm.
absolutely intense super wave that has never been seen before or since anywhere. And a lot of people don't even know about it because, this subject is so effectively covered up.
Right.
But they do put on displays. I wrote a book called Schoolyard UFO Encounters because of Rua, Zimbabwe, Aerial
Right.
Elementary
Yes.
School.
I remember that. Yes.
It's such a great case where UFOs landed next to the playground and ETs came out. I thought, well, gosh, that happened at Westall High School. And that happened at Crestview Elementary School in Opelika, Florida. And it happened in Broadhaven in Wales and Hillsdale College. And so I started digging in, and I found 100 cases, Christina, of
Wow.
UFOs hovering over schools and landing in 1/3 of the cases, which is a lot. And these are daylight sightings, very
Yeah.
long lasting, very close up, very low level, clear, honest to God, undeniable displays. So ETs are on a mission to let people know that they are here and real. And I think have been very effective in that, despite the
Well,
government cover up.
right. I guess that leads me into my next question because so with my precog dreams, they're very, very accurate. And although in my young teenage years when I would have them, it would be mostly just weather, weather incidences, things like that, major weather that was coming. But as I got older, they changed. Like I was shown 9/11 before it happened. I've been shown lots of false flags attacks. I've been shown all these different things. Um, I'm now being shown an alien invasion, but not a real alien invasion. What are your thoughts about that? Oh, your dog's interested in land. Let's talk about that one, Dad.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you brought that up because I've had a lot of precognitive dreams too,
Oh,
and
okay.
I absolutely know exactly what you're talking about because you get
Okay.
this information and it's undeniable, and then it happens, and you're like, wow. I do think that we're being set up for a false flag, fake ET invasion. I'm quite concerned about it. There's an
I am
ET,
too.
yeah, there's an alien threat narrative that's being put forth and has been put forth for years. And it's not warranted, it's not accurate, it's not represented by the actual cases. Because if you look at what happens when people have contact, well, it can be very scary and often
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
They're not here to hurt us or scare us or take over or eat us for lunch. There's no evidence for that. So I
And if
don't.
that's the case, I mean, they could have come out in the open and wiped us all out or took us all for dinner or whatever they
Right?
needed to do. It's not like they would need to wait to all of a sudden. When I was shown it immediately, it was like they were showing me that this was going to happen, but it was not real ET. So that it was the government was behind it. And I'm with you, it's kind of disturbing because it's like I think that there is so much distrust in our government and with everything going on and everything things are coming out to show a lot of things that people are considered conspiracy theorists are also now when it has to do with the government it's coming out that oh no it's not conspiracy it was all truth as well just buried under a lot of things I worry though with the information that is coming out I feel like it's going to for so many people it's like a scare tactic to make them run to the government for help and advise them what they should do so that they don't get destroyed like in the movies.
Yeah. And my advice to people would be don't do that. Don't look to our government for answers. They have lied from day one. They're still lying now. They're giving these absolutely ridiculous explanations and saying, we don't know what this is. They know what it is. Like I said
Right.
earlier, they absolutely know. They've reverse engineered UFO craft to a certain extent, not nearly to the extent that perhaps they would like.
Right.
But yeah, they have not had our best interests in mind. And I hate to say it like that because, I think that it's, great to be alive and have, freedom of speech and all of the things that we enjoy. But if you look into the history of our governments, not just the US, but across the planet, they're very oppressive. They're very much more into greed and power. I mean, for Pete's sake, we have companies that are funding both sides of wars.
Right.
What is that? That makes zero sense. They don't
Right.
have our best interests in mind. And
And
I'm
I think
really
as time
concerned
goes
about
on, it just gets worse and worse. I mean, again, they've always denied that there were any, dark secret, components of the government, where they did all their black budget tech, technology and things like that. But again, it's been coming out forever that these absolutely do exist. They absolutely do exist. And that is scary. The fact that there seems to be no kind of control or overseeing or watchful eye on what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just
But
like they can do
I
whatever.
still have faith in humanity. I do. I think ultimately the people are the strongest force on this planet. And when an idea's time has come, nothing's going to stop it. And
No, that's true.
if the
I
people who,
agree.
if the people who think they're in power don't wake up, they're going to lose power. And that's the ET threat. It's the threat to their control over humanity, to their wealth, to their
Right,
narrative. That's
right.
why they're pushing forth this ET threat narrative, because they're about to lose their jobs and their money and their control over everybody. Because this is not sustainable. It's just
Right.
not. People
I
are
love that.
waking up.
I love that analogy. Rasa Deborah says, we had one crash not far from where I live about 10 years ago. Undercover vehicles came rolling through the town. And then weeks later, we saw a round shaped metal shape on a diesel truck with no clean picture could be taken of it.
Yeah, UFO crashes are so much more common than people realize. And people always quote Roswell and the Paradise Valley crash in Arizona of 54 and Kecksburg in 65, Aztec crash in New Mexico. But when I wrote UFOs over California, I found a number of crashes in that state. And then, of course, I wrote one about New York and Colorado and Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona, and they all had cases. And if you look
Yeah.
into that particular aspect of ufology, you'll see it's in the hundreds, if not more. So that doesn't surprise me. And this is, again, the biggest subject for our quote, secret governments. This is where all our tax dollars are going. If you track our tax dollars, it's like 90% black budget. Well, now you know where it's going. Look at the research Michael Schratt has done on this.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of a handful of researchers. I'm like, you go, because
Right.
I trust him. I think he's doing good, objective, moral-based research. And this is another thing that we need to pay attention to is the disinformation in this field.
And it's crazy, even from within our own field. Like that's, and again, it's not just on the UFO side, it's also on the paranormal side. I have never seen so many people with push their opinions down their throats as if it's fact.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely incorrect, the information that they're putting out. And, don't dare try to correct anybody or, I mean, I saw somebody the other day that, posted a picture and they gave somebody on the page gave a very rational explanation of what it was. And it was from the photograph and from the flash. And so the person explained everything in very detail. Oh my gosh, the person who put the post out just went off. The person that all the friends that followed that person were now attacking this other person for, critiquing it. And it was crazy. It was crazy. And the amount of just like you said, disinformation, everybody feels like they're an expert and nobody really has a clue. It's a very interesting time out there in the fields for sure.
This field has been so hard to push forward because from the
Yes.
beginning, even before I'm a latecomer, let's face it, this subject was studied since the 50s, really. Right. And I came into it in the mid 1980s. But for years, UFO researchers wouldn't touch any cases involving humanoids. They didn't want to hear it. Of course, that's the central focus of the contact phenomena is, the ETs themselves. But
right.
No, they didn't want any cases involving humanoids. They weren't considered credible. And then, of course, people being taken on board. No, that can't happen. That's not happening. And UFO crashes. That aspect was absolutely debunked for years. Debunked is probably the wrong word, but, pushed aside, explained away, ignored, denied. They wouldn't talk about it for years. And the first guy who ever did was Frank Scully in his book Behind the Flying Saucers. He was
Mm-hmm.
attacked so bad that no one would touch the subject for about 10 or 20 years
Right.
until Stanton Friedman came along and interviewed Major Jesse Marcel and broke the Roswell case. And again, that took a long time to come out. Now, of course, these are the forefronts of UFO research, is the onboard UFO experience and UFO crash retrievals and disclosure. This is where we're going to see the most information coming out. So, yeah,
And it
very
does seem
resistant.
like more people are coming forward now. More people are feeling more comfortable to come forward because it's not, I mean, it's still a taboo subject for a lot of people, but in our fields, more people are coming out, and that's what's really kind of pushing forward, the field as in a whole, as okay, we've got government people, we've got regular people, all these people are coming out. But I also, just with everything, then you start getting a lot of people who want to get some fame. So all of a sudden they come out of nowhere with an abduction story or whatever. Have you come across any of that?
Oh, I certainly see it in the UFO field. And there are some people who are major, personalities, I guess I'll call them, on the UFO circuit. And you go to these conventions and you hear them speak, and I'm like rolling my eyes. I'm like, where are you getting this information? Where's your data? Where's your evidence? This sounds
Right,
absolutely outrageous. And some of these people are well paid speakers. I'm like, oh my God, what is
right.
going on here? Uh, I rarely, you know, I think there are people who are hoaxing, but I have to tell you, the people who call me are almost always certain that they've had an unusual experience, are very wary at first, and
Yeah,
they'll say something along the lines of, listen, I haven't told my spouse. I have never told my husband. My children don't know this. Please don't
right.
use my name. I've got a good job. Got no
Hmm.
history of drug abuse or mental
Right.
illness. Or, you
Yeah,
know,
that's the main one. That I swear I'm not crazy. I am not crazy, but this happens. So that makes me feel good. And again, it makes me feel good that people are feeling safe enough to come forward to certain places. That's always been my premise for this show, was to give a safe platform for just regular everyday people. I
yeah,
don't really like having the big names in the field because I feel like everybody, they say the same thing. Like it's nothing new. So everybody's heard that if you follow, you really follow in this field. But having people who actually have experiences, and for some it's very traumatic. For some it's got very inspirational messages, to share with people. So I find that very fascinating. And those are the ones that are left out. And I feel like, okay, you give them a safe platform to be able to share and have a community to support them, then that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I
yeah.
love what you're doing.
Well, kudos to you, because that's exactly how I feel, which is why this book is all new cases,
I love
never
that.
before published. And I always do that because, you could put out another book on Roswell, and somebody just did. I saw it. Another book on Betty and Barney Hill, and another book on Travis Walton, which is,
Right,
not even with his permission. I mean,
right.
people, which is, I
Just
mean,
put out anything and regurgitate what's already out there and make money just putting the
yeah,
same thing out, just reworded a little bit different. Roscoe Deborah says, I thought it was fake at first, but I managed to validate it. It's not Roswell either. This occurred in the California Arizona border. These vehicles were van looking, and a bit too long, as well as dark. I thought that song was going to start playing how many how many dark vehicles pass through. It is interesting. Most people know that, if they know anything about crashes, is that there usually is a big government cover up. I mean, there are very specific organizations that are involved. Even local police or local municipalities may show up at the beginning, but almost always military personnel show up and they take over. And
yep,
again, everybody's threatened to be quiet. you don't talk about this. And that's usually exactly what happens. And then these things are moved in the middle of the night. Helicopters can take, depending on, how remote they are or where the area is. I guess they have a plan to try to hide it and not let anybody know. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
What they'll tell people, because I've heard this from some whistleblowers that I've personally interviewed, that this was a helicopter crash. This was a crash of a test flight of some
Hmm.
kind. And they
Right.
scoop it up and give it a false explanation. And they're very, very, very busy behind the scenes, these folks. Our military is neck deep involved in this. If you start
Oh,
looking at it, Air Force bases like Norton Air Force Base or Edwards or Nellis, or you can go down the list. They're all implicated in this. It's
right. We have
horrendous.
Bill Air Force Base out here, and I had a person that was a client of mine, and his whole family, they had seen a UFO. A person in their little area had been abducted, not once but multiple times. He was considered the old crazy guy that claims he's abducted. Uh, Men in Black showed up after he disappeared. Very interesting things. Interesting things happen around the military bases, too. It's a very interesting areas for sure.
Yeah, interesting. It's a good
Yeah.
word. It's a loaded word.
Very much so, very much so. Well, we are just about out of time, but I want you to get a chance to let people know where they can go and get your book. And I really encourage everybody to go out there, because a lot of people who watch this show, as well as watch my other show, again, I think reading this book shows you so many examples of real life stories where a lot of this stuff intertwines. So if you've experienced, if you contact abductee sightings, you also have paranormal stuff going on. Maybe don't think you're crazy. You really can experience all this stuff and not be crazy. It really, I love that you're validating all this. So where can people find it?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. It's not hard to find. Of course, it's for sale on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and online retailers. I have a
Perfect.
website. Punch my name in. It'll take you there. I'm easy to contact on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel for those who don't want to read books. I'm presenting my
Okay.
research at the pace that I'm able to do. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
My books are
Absolutely.
on Audible as well. So that's
Nice.
becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's such an important subject. I'm so glad you're doing this show and have the courage to talk about both aspects, because a lot, even today, like you said, people are not willing to do that, and it's so
Well,
important.
it's the majority of it is a personal journey. I mean, again, I know the connection because I've experienced the connection. So, once you've experienced yourself, like myself and yourself, um, it fuels you. I got away from speaking at conferences only because I was blacklisted, because if you don't conform to what even the agenda that, conferences want to put out, then you're not invited anymore. And I'm not really kind of a, kiss butt kind of person. So, you know, I
I
felt like,
feel
okay, if you want to blackball me, that's okay. I'll just start my own platform and I'll get the information out more to than a couple hundred people at a conference. So that's, been the goal. I continue to do that. As long as I have breath in me, I will be doing, these shows to put this out. I have enjoyed always. Even like the last, I enjoy having you on the show. I may need to, I'll contact you after we're off air, but invite you to come on Paranormal Connections, because again, I think that, I have different audiences on both sides. And again, I think that it's important, to really talk about this and talk about the connections and how it's okay. Because there's still a lot of people that are just like complete naysayers, like, oh, there can't be connected. There's no
yeah.
way. There's no way. They're separate. So
Well, they'll learn sooner or later. It
they
might be a
will
rude
learn.
awakening, but it'll happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. For those who joined late, or if you are happening to catch the rerun, please do me a favor and share this with all of your friends and groups so we can get the information out. As always, I thank everybody for being here. Actually, I will not be back next Thursday. I will be out of town Thursday through Sunday. And the week following, I'll be back with a great show. So stick around, stay tuned, and I will be back in just a few short weeks. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Good night.